Hi, everybody. My name is Bria Golder, attorney at law. I am also a musician, and so what I focus on is corporate law, contracts, and things like that that help people like myself who are in entertainment. And oftentimes in life, we have to deal with conflicts. Raise your hand. Anybody in there, raise your hand if you've ever had to deal with a problem, an issue, a conflict, whether that's at school, at home. Raise your hand by show of hands. I know plenty of you have had conflicts. There's not one person in here that has never had to deal with a conflict. But how we deal with our conflicts is what matters. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Conflict resolution. Okay, so first I'm going to give you guys 14 pointers about conflict resolution. So we're going to talk about how people normally deal with conflicts, and then we'll go through 14 pointers of how we can better handle conflicts when they arise. So, how do people normally deal with conflicts? And you should have a handout. I want you guys taking notes and writing this stuff down because it's very, very important. One way that people normally deal with conflicts is to avoid them. So the word is avoid. Avoidance means that, I hate having problems with people, and instead of us talking about it, or instead of me confronting the situation, I just sweep it under the rug. I'm not going to say anything to you. I'll act like I'm bothered, but, I'll just act like everything is okay. But you can tell I'm bothered, but everything's okay because I just don't want to talk about it. So I avoid the conflict. Another way that people deal with conflict is aggressively. They get upset, they get angry, they act on emotion, whether that's physical aggression or just verbal aggression. They're very aggressive in their approach. And so when you're aggressive to somebody, that makes the other person get defensive. And so as opposed to it being healthy communication and conflict resolution, then now we just have problems, and those turn into fights and arguments, and nothing good ever comes of that. So those are the two ways that people normally handle conflict. What do we want to do? What do we want to discuss today? We want to talk about non-aggressive conflict resolution. So that is the goal. That is the way to maintain respect. And at the end of the day, the number one rule is respect. Make sure you guys write that down. You want to be respected. You want to be a respectable person, and you want people to respect you. In every aspect of your life, you always want to demand respect. And in order to demand respect, you have to be a respectable person. So we'll focus on that today as we talk about conflict resolution. So 14 ways to resolve conflict in a healthy way. Number one, don't get defensive. So when you're defensive, you use words like, but this is my point, or you interrupt people before they're finished saying what they need to say about the problem. You don't allow people the opportunity to express themselves. Rather, you may interrupt them or cut them off. You're barging in before they're able to get across their point for you to understand and listen and then respond. So don't be defensive. You need to listen to what they're saying, and you may not agree with what they're saying, but at least try to understand their point of view so that you guys can have a healthy conversation about the problem that's between the two of you, or the three of you, or however many people are a part of this conflict. Number two, avoid the blame game. So never say it's all your fault, or you always do this, or you never do that. Don't point the finger, because at some point we're wrong as well. We have to take responsibility for our own actions. So don't avoid the blame game. Don't just always point blame at the other person, but rather say, this is what happened. This is the problem that we have, and this is how I feel about it. So now what can we do? Instead of, calling that person names or calling them out and things like that. That usually is not a healthy way to resolve conflict. So avoid the blame game at all costs. Be sure and look at the situation and see what maybe you could have done to contribute to it as well. Talk with that person and then figure out a resolution for how to resolve the problem. Number three, listen actively. So I kind of mentioned this before, but you don't want to listen just to respond. You don't want to listen just so that you can have something to say back that doesn't agree with what that person said. Because sometimes that's the issue all by itself, is that you guys just can't effectively communicate. So make sure you're always actively listening to that person so that you can hear exactly what their point is and what their intent was. And then you can respond based on that. If let's say, someone sends me a text message. A lot of times people get really, really mad at me because I text really, really slow. So if you send me a text message on Monday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning and I don't respond until Tuesday night at 10 o'clock at night, so that's more than 24 hours later, you could be very upset with me for not responding to your text. But instead of us communicating, you decide to blow up on me and go off about it. But if we communicate, you'll understand that the reason I didn't text back until more than 24 hours later is because I've been so busy with other things. I didn't check my phone. Maybe I dropped my phone in water and it's not working. Or maybe, my mother was in the hospital. Just a world of things could have happened. But if we don't communicate about that and you don't listen to my side of the story and see what my actual intent was, then we'll never solve the problem. Number 4, always begin your statements with I. So again, you never want to make it about the other person, because that's when people get defensive and it turns into an argument instead of effective communication. We want to make sure we are good, respectable communicators. That's the only way to ever get things done in life, is to be able to effectively communicate. So if I start statements with I as opposed to with you, then that means I'm taking responsibility for my actions and my feelings instead of just pouring it all on you and making it all your fault. So I say, I feel like this situation could have been handled differently, or I feel like you were wrong because, and that's how you outline your problem, as opposed to saying you were wrong, blah, 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 because I'm sure that other person doesn't feel that way. By a show of hands, I want everybody to show me their hand if you feel like you've ever been wrong in a situation. Raise your hand. I'll raise 2, because I've definitely 100% been wrong in plenty of situations, and you have to be able to take accountability for that. But a lot of times when there's a conflict, it's because I see it my way, you see it your way, and then there's this other in between that we haven't explored yet, and that's where the conflict resolution comes in. But most times, people don't think that their perspective or their opinion is wrong. And so that's why we end up with conflict. It's simply because people don't see eye to eye on a particular thing or a particular issue or a particular topic. And so now we're into it because I don't agree with you and you don't agree with me and we don't know how to fix it. So always start your statements with I, so that you can say, this is how I feel. This is the problem. This is what I'd like to do. Or you're making me feel like this because, as opposed to just, again, playing the blame game, pointing the finger, telling that person why they're wrong without taking responsibility for your own feelings. Number 5, and this is a big one. This actually could help a lot if you just tame your emotions. So you don't ever want to act out of emotion. When you're emotional, you're irrational. And just think about if you've ever, gotten really, really angry with somebody, whether that's your mom, your dad, your cousin, your teacher. If you're really, 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 really angry, you act irrationally. You just want to act out of those emotions. You might want to, punch somebody in the face or punch a hole through the wall or cry all of your tears. You're not very rational in those moments because all you can think about is the way that you're feeling. And your feelings and your emotions are valid for sure. You want to be able to handle those. You want to be able to release that tension and that energy. But you just don't want to do that when you're trying to resolve a conflict because you're not thinking rationally. You won't be able to communicate as clear as you normally could if you work through those emotions first. So always make sure you tame your emotions. You do not want to go into a conflict resolution or a conversation with somebody and you are just crying so hard that you can't clearly and concisely get your point across. You always want to seem like you have it all together. Again, showing up, being that respectable person, having your emotions under control so that you can clearly communicate exactly what it is that you want them to know. You want to get that point across so that you guys can fix that problem and move on. Tame your emotions. Number six, show that you can compromise. So it's not always about being right. I'm right, you're wrong, there's that. We'll never reach a solution if we approach the situation that way. So show that you know how to compromise. If I want the painting to be red and you want the painting to be blue, well, let's meet somewhere in the middle and make the painting purple. Or, it's just your way and it's my way. And then there's somewhere in the middle that we can meet to make it make sense. Especially if it's something that's not that big of a deal or something where, I can give a little as opposed to just, I have to be right. Always leave room for compromise. That is very, 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 very important with communication and with building relationships, whether that's for work or for school. I know you guys may do team projects. If you play sports, things like that, you do not always have to be right. And that does not necessarily mean that you agree with the other person's point of view. You're just willing to compromise. You're willing to say, okay, I see where you're coming from, and I have a feeling that's completely different from yours, but let's meet in the middle and do it this way. And that is totally fine. So be willing to compromise. Show that you're willing to effectively communicate and meet somewhere in the middle. Number 7, do not badmouth somebody to other people. That is not a good look. That is not a means for respect. You always want to stand on respect, and you always want to be a respectable person. And in order for someone to respect you, you have to be respectable, for one, and then you have to build that trust with somebody. So never badmouth someone to other people. It's just not a good look. It's just not something that you should do. It shows that maybe your thinking is a bit irrational, and it makes it harder to resolve a conflict if I know that you've gone and told my business to somebody else and you've tried to make me look bad. It's like, okay, it kind of defeats all of the other things we've talked about in regards to understanding the person and effectively communicating and meeting somewhere in the middle. It's like, what makes it harder for us to be able to do that if you've gone and talked bad about me to somebody else or to other people. As an alternative, you guys could write down how you're feeling. I know it sounds crazy, but you could talk to yourself. I do it all the time. Especially when I'm upset. I'm like, I know she didn't. I know they tripping out heavy if they did this to me. Like, that's crazy. But talk through all those thoughts and feelings with yourself, and then you'll be able to approach it differently because you've already worked through all the chaos in your brain. So now you can have a real actual conversation with that person. Or talk with somebody that doesn't know that person or doesn't know anything about the situation. Then they can either give you an unbiased opinion, which means that they can give you an opinion that's not connected to your side or their side, the other person's side. It'll just be an opinion that is kind of from a person that knows nothing about what's going on. Or they can be a listening ear that's harmless because, again, they don't know the person or the group of people. They have no idea what's going on. They don't know much about the situation. They're just kind of there to listen to you and allow you to vent. But you never want to badmouth that person or that group of people to other people to make them look bad, because it's just, it in turn kind of makes you look like a bad person. It's like, oh, well, she or he didn't have anything better to do than to go gossip about me or talk bad about me. And so it makes it harder for people to respect you and to trust you when it does come time to resolve that conflict. Number 8, don't take it personal. So if your teacher says something bad about your work, or let's say you're doing a group project or something, and one of the group members says that they don't like the way that you dot your I's and cross your T's. Well, don't take it personally, be able to differentiate and know the difference between who you are as a person and that particular behavior that they're criticizing. Nothing is wrong with them criticizing a particular point. Again, everybody is not going to have the same communication skills that you have because everybody has not sat through this conflict resolution class. So you are a respectable person regardless to if somebody else doesn't know how to communicate with you. We are only in charge of ourselves, and we have to make sure no matter what that we are always respectable people and effective communicators. So even if somebody delivers something to you wrong, so let's say that they don't like the way that you wrote your name on the board. For example, they may say, "Gross, your handwriting is very ugly." And you might get offended by that, and that'll make you get defensive, and you may want to say something bad back to them about what their handwriting looks like, or then you guys are in a joning session that it turns very personal and isn't funny because people get upset and defensive, and then we've got a big conflict on our hands when you could have just handled it immediately because you know how to effectively communicate even if the other person doesn't. So don't take things personal. If somebody says they don't like your handwriting, that's okay. That's fine. My handwriting is not who I am as a person, and you don't have to like my handwriting. That's okay. It's fine. It's okay. Just don't take things personal that are not personal, that has nothing to do with who you are as a person. Another thing about that is you could take some notes from it. So, for example, in my own life, if somebody tells me, like I said, I'm a musician as well. I play drums. So if somebody says, "Girl, you need some work on that drum set. Like, it's not giving. You're not doing that good." That may hurt my feelings, but then I might go back and look at a video of myself and be like, I did mess up right here, or that didn't sound that great right there. And now I've taken notes, and even though the person's delivery was wrong, and my feelings were hurt, I still was able to learn from the situation and better myself, because although they did make a rude comment or criticism in a rude way, I'm still able to learn and take that with a grain of salt and apply it to my own life. Because again, it's not personal. It's never personal. We keep it pushing because we are good, respectable people. And whatever they said, maybe we can learn from it. Even though their delivery was wrong, we still handle ourselves. So don't take it personal. Number 9, pay attention to nonverbal communication. This is very important. So if my boyfriend asks me, "Are you okay?" and I say, "I'm fine," that's a nonverbal communication. And so although I said I'm fine, really I'm not fine. And you can tell that because I shrugged my shoulders, the tone of my voice, the way I was looking, my overall energy. None of that is saying that I'm fine. The only thing that said I'm fine is the words that came out of my mouth. So always pay attention to people's nonverbal communication and try to work through that and get them to communicate with you what the problem is. Because if I say something that doesn't line up with my actions, people often say actions speak louder than words. And so if I say something that does not line up with my actions, and my actions are telling you I still have a problem, then more than likely there's still a conflict. Now, again, we are only responsible for ourselves. So you can't force somebody to work through a conflict with you. If you have tried your best to get to the bottom of the problem and they're not willing to work with you, then maybe we need to revisit our conflict resolution strategy or figure something else out. But what you can do is try to get them to communicate with you and just kind of take control of that situation, pay attention to those nonverbals, and work through that if you're able to do so. Okay, the next one is value fixing the conflict over being right. So we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's not always about being right. I'm right, you're wrong. If that's the case, we'll never resolve anything. We'll always have a problem because I feel how I feel, you feel how you feel, and there's no compromise. Remember, we talked about that earlier, being able to compromise. Not every battle is worth fighting. So as long as you maintain your respect and your dignity as a person, as long as you effectively communicate, look at the situation and you say, okay, is this really worth me going back and forth with this person, or would I just be doing that so that I can be right? And if that's the case, if you're doing it just to be right, not a battle worth fighting. Move on, save your energy, save your breath, move on to the next thing in your life, because I promise it is not worth your time. Okay, number 11, know when to forgive. Know when to forgive and forget the situation. So sometimes problems may arise with your family members, with your very close friends. And again, keep in mind everything that we've already talked about. What's people's intent? What did people mean by that? You may have been hurt by it, but they may not have meant to hurt you at all. How did this conflict arise? Never be afraid to forgive a person. You have to know when to forgive and move on. Don't hold resentment in your heart when somebody's intent was not to hurt you, because eventually that resentment may hurt you more than the situation did because you've lost a friend. So always think to yourself, is this worth me losing this relationship over? Whether that's your best friend, your cousin, another family member, your parents, your teachers, whatever the case. Always look at the situation and say, okay, we've tried to work through it. Should I go ahead and forgive this person, or do I need to hold on to this grudge or this anger that I'm feeling, just because they hurt my feelings? Always think about that, because people last longer than problems do. And so always make sure you work through that in your head and say, okay, I've been best friends with this person for 10 years. I want to save my relationship over not forgiving this person because my pride and my ego is in the way. Put your pride to the side and forgive so that you can move forward. Okay, focus on the present, not the past. I used to tell people all the time, I don't want you holding that over my head just because I did it a long time ago. And people don't like when you do that. When you forgive somebody, you move on, you leave the past in the past. So if a person hurt your feelings 2 years ago, but you have forgiven that person and you have truly moved on, you should never bring that up again. Leave old conflicts, old problems behind. If we got into a fight 3 weeks ago and here we are having another problem, I'm not going to bring up the fight from 3 weeks ago. We're going to focus right here, right now on the issue that we have currently, because the fight from 3 weeks ago doesn't matter. We already worked through that. I already forgave you. We were friends again. And now here we are at a new problem, at a new issue. So don't hold things over people's heads. Don't keep the past in your brain. Erase all of that. Move on so that you can have healthy relationships and healthy conflict resolution when new problems arise. Don't keep bringing up old stuff. Leave the old stuff in the past so that you can handle new conflicts when and if they do happen. I want you guys to keep something in your brain. It's called the 48-hour rule. And it's helpful for you to resolve conflicts, for you to not be angry, for you to control your emotions, and for you to not hold on to the past. So the 48-hour rule, write this down. 48-hour rule means that if a problem happens, if I have a problem with you, I'm going to confront you within 2 days of my problem. So problem happens, I give myself time to work through it. I give myself time to be mad, angry. I give myself time to cry, whatever the case may be. And then I'm coming to confront you about the situation so that I'm no longer hurt or upset about it. I can get it off my chest and let you know how I feel, and we can move on. It also keeps things current. So anything that happened before that 48 hours, anything that happened before that reason why you're upset, none of that matters. Only the new problem. That's the only thing we're focused on. That's the only thing we're going to fix, because everything else we've already worked out. So the 48-hour rule keeps things relevant. We're working on our right now problems. We'll fix those and move on. Okay, number 13, use humor when appropriate. Who doesn't like to laugh? I love to laugh. I love funny things. I love jokes. I'm kind of corny. I tell corny jokes, but but I do enjoy laughing. So it's very, very good to laugh. Of course, you don't want to make somebody laugh and also hurt their feelings. So you don't want to say something that may offend the other person or may get under their skin. You want to make sure that you're dealing with somebody that will find whatever it is that you're saying funny as well. Because sometimes that could hurt the situation if they think you're making light of it or if you're not approaching it as seriously as you should be. So it's always good to have a little humor just to break the tension, break the ice, especially if you guys haven't talked in a while. But then, of course, when it's time to work through those problems, be serious and let them know that you're not making light of it or not taking them seriously. Okay. Last but not least, number 14, and I've kind of mentioned this earlier, but always remember the importance of the relationship. So, yeah, we got a problem, but is it really a big enough issue for me to lose my best friend? You know, problems fade, people usually stick around. And so you always want to make sure that you analyze the situation. Take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to work through it within yourself first so that you can come to that person, let them know you have a problem, and then you guys are able to work it out and move on. Because you never want to lose people that you value a lot in your life. Relationships matter a lot. I tell people all the time, I could make all the money in the world, but my relationships and people are my greatest form of currency, of money, because without people, then there's nobody to support my product. If I walk around with a bad attitude, if I'm not a likable, respectable person, nobody's going to want to hire me for a job. If I don't know how to work through conflict, nobody's going to want to deal with me. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. You always have to make sure you are a respectable individual and you value relationships, because they are very, very important when it comes to anything. Your professional career, your athletic career, if you're an athlete, when it comes to your schoolwork, working with teams, when it comes to your teachers, having a good relationship with your teachers, your family at home. It's just always good to be a respectable person and to effectively communicate. And remember, we are in charge of ourselves only. So if somebody didn't learn everything that you just learned just now, they don't know how to effectively communicate. Well, they might. But they may not know how to necessarily effectively communicate or be a good listener or know how to work through conflict. So it's your job to be that bigger person and to use what you've learned today to work through conflicts, save your relationships, save your energy if it's not worth it, and be a respectable person. Hey guys, I want to play a game. And I know a lot of you have probably heard of arm wrestling, where you put your hand like this. Other person grabs your hand on the opposite side of the table. I can't really do it. Can't arm wrestle with yourself, and you try to put the other person's hand down. Okay. So that is the position that you'll be in. Partner up with one person, get into the arm wrestling position. But this is not arm wrestling. You'll be in that position, but there are no rules. There's no rules in this game. There's only two things that I want to tell you. You earn a point if the back of the other person's hand hits the table. That's first. And then secondly, the goal of the game is to get as many points as you can. Those are the only rules. You earn a point when the back of the other person's hand hits the table, and the goal of the game is to get as many points as possible. So I want you guys to take a moment to play this game. Again, it's not arm wrestling. Get into the arm wrestling position and remember the 2 notes I just gave you, and then I'll be right back to talk about it. Okay, how'd it go, guys? I'm sure we had some winners. I'm sure we had a lot of people that were putting them hands down on the table, but I'd be curious to know who got the most points and who thought outside of the box, because again, there were no rules. So in traditional arm wrestling, you can't lift your elbow off the table. You can't let go of the other person's hand. And all of these things are rules that I never stated. Remember, I said there were no rules. So you guys literally could have let go of each other's hands and put your own hand on the table to give the other person points. Or you could have talked through it. How many of you guys talked about it to try to negotiate and come up with a strategy where you could both get a lot of points? Did anybody talk about it or discuss what was going on? How many of you let go of each other's hands to figure it out? I know some of you probably stood up or, tried to put more energy into getting that person down, but you've got to think outside of the box, because when you communicate, it helps resolve conflicts. We had a conflict right here. We were stuck together. We were trying to figure out how we can get the most points, and there were no rules. And so maybe with a little discussion between each other, we could have figured out a strategy faster that allowed us both to get quite a few points. Hope that was fun for you guys. Remember, conflict is natural. It's uncomfortable a lot of times, but it's always necessary. And the word conflict is looked at as a bad thing, but it's really not bad at all as long as you know how to resolve your conflict. Conflict will literally always come up in your life. There will always be some sort of problem for as long as you live, because everybody is entitled to their own opinion. Everybody is entitled to their own way of doing things. And so it's very important that you are able to discuss, communicate, and effectively resolve conflict. Okay, I'm going to leave you guys off with this. When there's a conflict, think about this strategy, and I definitely want you to write it down. And it's an acronym, which means that every letter stands for something. The acronym is STABEN, S-T-A-B-E-N, STABEN. The first letter, S, stands for source. So identify the source of your problem. What's the issue? Work through that. Think about that. What's the real problem here? And who caused that problem? What's the source of your issue? Number 2, time and place. And this one is very important because oftentimes, again, we act out of emotion. We get angry. We want to deal with it right then and there. But time and place is so important. That's how a respectable person deals with the problem. They identify what would be the right time and place. Okay, if you stepped on my shoe at this restaurant and we're in front of hundreds of people, right now may not be the right time and place for me to confront you. I'll wait until, we get outside, or I'll pull you to the side and say, hey, you just stepped on my shoe, and then we can work through the conflict there through a proper apology or whatever the case may be, as opposed to just blowing up in front of hundreds of people and making a big scene about it. Always remember time and place. There is a time and place for everything. Number 3, amicable approach, which is just a fancy way of saying be positive. So you never want to, again, shoot people down and tell them all the millions of things that they've done wrong or why they are wrong in this particular situation. You always want to start with something positive, especially if that's somebody that you have a relationship with. So if it's your best friend, you say, hey, you are an amazing person. We've been friends for years. You are funny and I love you, but I don't like how you did this, or I feel this type of way about this particular situation. Always be positive. That helps you to work through issues and it softens the blow. So instead of you just hitting me in my face with a bunch of issues, you've kind of, puffed me up a little bit or made me feel good. Let me know what you do appreciate about me, and that helps me work through our problem a little bit better. You're not making it seem like I'm just a bad person in general. B stands for behavior. So you always want to be able to identify the behavior or the thing that is making you feel the way that you feel, and be specific. You don't want to say, you always are a mean person, or you never clean up after yourself, or you just never want to be that general, because it's like, oh my goodness, I never am a good person. I always am rude to you. Like, are you serious? I've never had any good moments before. And so you want to make sure that you're not so general. You want to identify that exact behavior that is making you feel how you're feeling. And then that's what you want to confront with that other person. Emotion. Make sure you identify how that behavior is making you feel. So if I come home, my son hasn't washed the dishes, and he's supposed to wash the dishes every night. I say, son, you haven't washed the dishes for 3 nights. That's the behavior. You haven't washed the dishes for 3 nights. And that makes me feel very disrespected, because that's what I asked you to do. And so I've identified the behavior that he's done, and I've identified the emotion that I feel because of that. And so now we're able to work through that. Lastly is need. You want to be able to say what you need from the situation. So I've identified the behavior, what you're doing. I've identified the emotion, what I feel because of what you're doing. And then I've told you what I need to make the situation feel better. So you haven't washed the dishes for 3 nights, behavior. I feel disrespected because of that, emotion. What I need from you is to start washing the dishes so that I can feel better in this situation and I won't feel disrespected anymore. And sometimes you'll run into situations where it's not so cut and dry. It's not so easy, where the other person is like, okay, well, I don't want to wash the dishes. I know you told me to, but I don't like doing that just as much as you don't. And so as opposed to it being just a simple resolution, now we have to negotiate. We have to work through some things. Okay, I understand you don't like washing dishes. I don't like washing them either. How about I'll run the dishwater and have the dishes soak the night before, and then the next morning it makes it a little bit easier for you to wash them, as opposed to, you taking an hour to wash the dishes. Now it cuts the process in half. It'll only take you 30 minutes to knock them out. So always be willing to negotiate. But remember that acronym, STABIT, and that'll help you work through your conflicts. Okay, guys, I'm gonna leave you with this. What's the number 1 rule? Does anybody know? And you may have already said it. Respect. The number 1 rule is respect. You always want to be respected, and in order to gain respect, you have to be a respectable person. So work through your conflicts and your problems and your issues with all of the strategies that we've talked about today. Don't avoid it. You want to be able to talk through your issues. You need people to know how you feel. You don't want to hold all that in. Do not avoid your problems, but talk through them in a healthy way. Be an effective communicator, and that will help your life 100%. Okay, let's think of an example of a conflict in your life. Who wants to share? You guys can share with the class, or just have some time to kind of think of it about with yourself and journal and write about it, and then think about it through the scope of everything that we just talked about today and compare it. How did you handle that conflict before, and what could you have done better through everything that we just learned